Thank you for joining us today. You're welcome to this teachers workshop this afternoon. My name is Sophia Vonline, and I'm going to kind of kickstart things so we can get going. Thank you for joining really early. We appreciate that. We know lots of people will join us as we go on, and we're currently recording. So if there are any bits that you missed because of network issues or connectivity, please do not worry because we'll have this recorded. But as much as possible, make sure you use the chat button, and we want to make this as interactive as possible. So first of all, if you're a teacher in the house, show me an emoji, please. Just type in an emoji if you're a teacher, because today is a very special day, 5th of October. It is Teachers' Day. So I just want to say happy Teachers' Day to all of you. I can see some emojis flying. That's good. You know, in the UK, we don't celebrate Teachers' Day. So I only got to know that it was Teachers' Day by looking at my WhatsApp group, and I thought, oh, what are they going on about? But apparently in America and then the rest of it is a big thing. So I suppose those of us in the UK, we need to catch on somehow. Happy World Teachers' Day to every one of you. Thank you so much for all that you do for our children and for making such an impact. We value you a lot. So today we are looking at embracing every story. We're looking at navigating the very complex landscape of identity in our modern classrooms. So that's what we're focusing on today. And we're hoping that by the end of today, you will be able to leave here with lots and lots of strategies of how you can discuss and work with the children the students that you work with, and how you can help them just become their most brilliant self, how you can help them bring out the potential in them no matter where they are from. Some of the things we're going to look at today, we'll talk about diversity, we'll talk about inclusion. As we know, those are two buzzwords now, but what does it mean? And all of that we're going to be discussing under a very special umbrella. So we'll have a Q&A section where you can ask questions about anything that we have talked about. Please make notes if you can. And we'll also have the chat where you can put a lot of information. Throughout the sessions, I'll be asking you questions. Some of the speakers will also be asking you questions. Please join in and participate. We're hoping that this will be about an hour and 45 minutes long. Also, we want your reactions, okay? And please don't be a stranger after today. Follow us. We are everywhere. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, name it, LinkedIn. We're very active. We're also on YouTube. So be the first to know when exciting things are happening in Afri Kindness. As you know, well, let me not say as you know, because I don't think everybody does, but we are currently celebrating Africa Awareness Week in Afri Kindness. So unless you have been under a really big rock, you won't have heard about it because we've splashed it everywhere. And so this teacher training workshop is part of that Awareness Week. And as I said, today we're looking at embracing every story, navigating the landscape of identity in our modern classrooms. Today, we are absolutely honored to have two keynote speakers. First is Sadani Navlin Kaur, and I will just read through her bio because I'm absolutely honored that she's here with us. She is a distinguished consultant and she's a community educator. She's based in London. Now, she has a bachelor's degree in French literature from UCL. Whoop, whoop. And she's done a lot of extensive work in humanitarian development. She's worked in India. She's a trained Sikh minister. She also has a master's in educational psychology. And guess where that's from? University of Cambridge. She has a lot of outstanding accolades, including 3 Ofsted Awards. She is a renowned leader in SMSE, that is spiritual, moral, social, cultural education. She's a prolific writer. She's an advisor for various organizations. She focuses on faith, belief, and values. She is an active youth empowerment person. She's a mental health advocate, and she's an accomplished keynote speaker for our workshop today. So I would like to just call on Navlin, if you kind of take the floor, and would like to hear from you, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm quite humbled by that big introduction, Sophia. So thank you so much for letting us participate today and being part of your community. So I'm here with my colleague, actually, Ellen Day, who's an assistant principal, and we're both in the same establishment at Pioneer Secondary Academy, which is a school based in Buckinghamshire. And what we were going to share together with you today is a few things about how our personal journey and our personal impact, as far as deciding to be educators, leading the situations in our own personal life that has brought us to where we are now, as far as imparting education in the community. So both of us are going to be speaking together, and I think I'm going to begin just by talking a little bit about the race side of things, which I know you'd like us to focus on. Being a brown girl, studying French literature wasn't very popular, as you can imagine, and also growing up in the UK. So I grew up as Ellen. I think I'll just introduce a bit of that, and then Ellen, maybe you can do we can do this together. But we, both of us, obviously born and brought up in the UK. It was very difficult. It was a big struggle, looking different, having two identities. As we're closing the door at home, there's another identity that we were walking into. And Britain in the 1980s was not the Britain that you're familiar with now. So that constant battle with having to work out who I am, who I was at school growing up, and then marrying that identity to what was expected of me outside. So there was a big struggle, a lot of bullying, a lot of racism, a lot of mistaken identity, not having the literature, the language, or even the parental expertise to support that was quite a tough journey. So bringing all of those experiences together, I didn't want anybody else to go through that suffering, I suppose, which is probably partly why I became an educator. So the race and the identity was a big, big struggle in the UK for me personally at that time. I'm going to pass you on to Helen so she can maybe explore the same thing, and then we plan to do this a bit together, if I hope that's okay, Sophia.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Can I just introduce Ellen before you speak, Ellen, please? So everyone watching, we're delighted to have Ellen here, just as Navlin has explained. Ellen is an assistant head teacher with over a decade of dedicated service in education. So happy Teachers Day to you, first of all. Her passion lies in equipping young minds with skills that extend beyond the classroom. And these she has done in her roles as associate assistant principal. She's head of humanities and head of year 9. She's also a visionary leader in professional development and PSHE, which is personal social health and economic education. She has extensive experience and leadership in shaping holistic education. Today, she brings a wealth of knowledge and her expertise to this workshop. Welcome, Ellen.
Hi, everyone. I was going to tell you my age, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to leave you all guessing. I always identify myself as a Black, British, but fully African, specifically Malawian woman. And before I talk to you, I'd like to tell you that I have 3 children who are absolutely amazing, but they are mixed children. And as a mother and a teacher, I always wonder and I always query that, and I always want to ensure that when they get into the classroom in that space, I know they're learning about one side of the heritage because that's so embedded in the curriculum, but I always want to ensure that their teacher is going beyond the limitations of our curriculum and ensuring that they learn about their heritage as well, their African heritage. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about what I do, because I know when I have kids in front of me, I want them to be able to identify, this is my race, and I'm more than what the media might portray with me, that I have a lot to offer and a lot to aspire to. So I actually was born in Malawi, and I came here, came to Devon when I was 2 years old. And Devon was a very interesting experience for me because I was the only, bar my siblings, was the only Black kid in my class, basically. And my education and learning about who I was in the classroom started off with learning about slavery, as if that was my beginning and it was my end. And that wasn't what it was. And I think that had a massive impact on me, because even now, when I teach students about history or their identity, I don't start off with slavery, because it's more than just slavery. Their journey doesn't begin there. It begins with being warriors, inventors, being creative, being inspirational. And I think it's important to acknowledge identity and racial identity, because if you don't acknowledge it, you limit the children and their journey.
Yeah, so similarly with what Ellen's saying, having that, knowing that you're coming from this different race, this different background, maybe even having parents that are illiterate, not able to communicate with even your teachers, where does that leave you as a student and the capacity to explore? So like Ellen, same thing, coming from this, I was, personally, the journey was tough. I was bullied left, right, and center because I had long braids, my plaits. They were tied to the back of the chair so that when I'd get up, I'd hit the back of my head. It was very violent. And I was always afraid. And I think the fear was, well, we know where your parents work, we'll do this, we'll do that. And that was such a painful struggle. I didn't know, as a young person, where to turn to, who to go to, and how to be supported, until I started accessing education through the community, where I felt empowered, where I felt accepted. And then going from that environment to then a single sex, completely white girls' school where my teachers were all nuns, it was very different. And again, I was told that I should wear the cross, which I very happily accepted. My parents were very open to faith and belief and values, luckily. But there was a part of me that was very Christian, because I was singing the hymns and I was very comfortable with chanting in the chapel, just because I was desperate. Also, I loved singing, so that helped. I love music. But the part of me that I just wanted to fit in, just constantly wanted to belong, so that in the classroom, I would be accepted for who I was. The fact that I was, able to do literacy or numeracy or whatever was thrown in front of me, I wanted just to be like everyone else. I wanted to just blend in. And as Ellen is saying, the historical side, or where I came from, what heritage, what faith, belief, and values, that didn't even come on there was nothing that was recognized, appreciated, until one day, I think, a teacher asked me where my place of worship was. And I remember this one moment where I say to, a lot of people laugh, but I say it's actually the nuns who made me turn to my own Sikh faith and ministry. And it's the nuns that made me a good Sikh. I mean, because what they tried to do was instill values of charity, of service, of love. And through that, I was able to answer questions about what we were doing on a Sunday with my own family, where I would go, what I would do, that everyone was served. And that was where partly the rebellion began, because I started to try and invest into try and find out who I was, what heritage I had, because it didn't appear in any classrooms. It definitely wasn't explored and wasn't engaged. I wasn't asked to share, until I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this by myself. It's not, somebody hasn't asked me the question, but I'm going to share anyway. And then that history, that culture, that empowerment through community engagement started to seep through, and I started to learn a bit about myself, but then became confident enough to share that with my fellow, teachers, students, which is where I gained the confidence, I think.
Naveen's mentioned a few really key areas, that whole sense of belonging, because I knew that when I was younger, if you're in a class with other people who look different than you, you still want to belong. And I have so many stories of being in a classroom and having braids, and a teacher picking up that braid that fell out on the other side of the classroom and holding it up and saying, "Who's lost the Medusa?" Because of Medusa had snakes in her hair, and being like, "Oh my God, that's me." And then having that walk of shame to go and get that braid, and then knowing that everyone is looking, everyone is laughing, my teacher's also laughing, no one is getting criticized for laughing about it. Maybe it's okay, maybe it's acceptable, maybe it's my issue, maybe it's my problem. We were having this conversation early on, and I spoke to Navleen about, I had this, and I cannot remember her name for the life of me, but I had this English teacher, and it was in primary school, and we were writing fairy tales, and she said to the class, there are so many fairy tales out there about princesses, and there's such amazing stories, but you never ever pick up a book and read about a Black princess. And for the first time, and it feels like the first time, I kind of thought, wow, that's so true. I hadn't really acknowledged it, and I never really thought of it as a problem until she said that. And I thought, actually, what? You're absolutely correct. Like, that narrative of being this princess who's desirable, who is intelligent, who's courageous, isn't out there. And I think that's one of the things that inspired me to get into being a politician before actually becoming a teacher. So we moved into London when I was probably in secondary school. And I always had the issue of, when I was in Devon, I was too Black, so I didn't fit in. When I moved to London, I wasn't Black enough, so I didn't fit in again. And the way I spoke always made people be like, oh, are you actually Black? Are you actually Black? And all those different experiences from school, from the classroom, made me want to get into politics. And when I did finally get into politics, I was so eager to talk about equality, diversity, inclusion, and how that we're really, really, really eager and busy to tell people not to be racist, but we don't spend enough time teaching people how to be empowered and how to enjoy who they are and feel comfortable in their own skin. We don't, as teachers or educators, we don't spend enough time saying to parents and caregivers, how are you shaping the mind of your young person? How are you changing their mindset? Because if the media portrays one thing, if the curriculum is limited and doesn't enrich your child, what are you doing? So I think, in short, like, that's why I massively appreciate the fact that the government started making PSHE and RSC a statutory requirement, because part of it is about identity. Part of it is about accepting diversity, not just accepting it, and not just tolerating, but actually embracing diversity. And I'm a firm believer that as a teacher, it is your job. It is actually your job to ensure you go beyond the curriculum and you see every child for who they are. I absolutely, okay, I say absolutely, but I do not like it when someone says, I see you. I do not see your color, I see you. Well, actually, if you don't see my color, then you don't see my story. And if you don't see my story, you can't possibly know my struggle. But that's the same as when you see students in front of you and you say, I just see you as the student. Well, what's the story behind them? Like, what are they going home to? What sense of belonging do they have or do not have? I think that's all questions as a teacher we should be wanting to ask and explore with our students.
Yeah, and I think just, hitting on what Ellen's saying, the individuality, taking what you're really trying to do here is you're bringing out what's inside the student themselves. It's not what you are trying to push onto them. You're not projecting another mountain, or you should be this and you should. It's actually about nurturing and cultivating the energy, the passion, the focus that's inside that student, and helping lift out what they are passionate about, what makes them sing, what makes them dance, what makes them excited. And if you need to, bring in something that will empower that student because of, and use their heritage and race in a positive way, imagine how empowering that can be. I mean, both of us didn't have that. And that's partly why we're the kind of teachers I think that we are, because we know how it feels to be on the other end of the spectrum and not receive that engagement or empowerment. But if you as an educator can tap in, first of all, put that oxygen mask on yourself, put that faith and belief and confidence back within you that you can actually do this, and then nurture that creativity within the person sitting in front of you, and just be a filter, not somebody who's already got an agenda. I mean, their parents will have agendas, their families, their people are close to them will always try to project something onto them. Whereas as an educator of excellence that sees beyond anything, you will actually pull out and create a space that's safe, that that person can feel nurtured and then go on their own individual journey and find out what they're passionate about and then help them achieve that. And, you know, that will also mean create opportunities, get networks, bring people in, speak with all sorts of things that we do, for example, here in our school, and also, you know, through education in general, is to create a space where young people can feel that they can access anything, they can be anything, be excited about life and living. And in this kind of difficult time that we're going through with crisis all around us, we still want to be able to give them that array of hope that, you know, this can happen.
That aspiration, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
wanting more than what media might say you're entitled to, but embracing the world around you, but also having the ability to accept others and to integrate with others, but not forgetting who you are as well. Yeah, I think that's
I think
us.
that's us. Yeah.
Oh wow, thank you so much. There's so many things you've packed into a few minutes. That's amazing. I think I really like what you have said about what we as teachers have a responsibility to do, because I think that's really important. And sometimes you find that it takes somebody who's on the other side to be able to say, look, actually, this is what I need you to do to reach me. This is what I need you to do to understand who I am. I like what you said, Ellen, about when people say, I see you. And that's such a buzz phrase. I see you, I don't see your color, but really, yeah, if you see me, then you're seeing all of me. just looking at me like a transparent block of glass, you have to see my color. But thank you so much for your words. And I'm just looking at the chat to see if people have questions. I don't know if you have a bit of time to hang around for a bit. I'm sure some questions and comments will come up, which you might be able to help us with. That's okay. Thank you. Please let's give thumbs up to Navlin and Ellen. Share your emojis. Write your nuggets. What have you picked up from what they have both said? And I think what makes you so poignant is that both of you have the lived experiences. And that matters so much, in explaining the issue of identity in our communities. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on now to the rest of the workshop, and I'll just share my screen as we kind of continue. That would lead us on to the next bit. Okay, so yeah, this is my bit. So my name is Sophia Vonlen. I have the awesome privilege of leading the education team at Afrikindness, and I would start off the rest of the workshop, and I'll be looking at some key aspects, and hopefully we can explore that together. And if you have any questions as I speak, please feel free to pop them in the chat box. So this is looking at the aims of this workshop. We are looking under a specific umbrella. When we start talking about this workshop, we're thinking about what do we want to achieve? What are we planning to discuss? And under which umbrella we're looking at it, because if we open up identity, there are so many facets of it. It's not just one aspect. So we wanted to be quite clear about what we're focusing on and what we want the workshop to be all about. So our aim really is to discuss issues that are associated with children from minority groups, just like Navlin and Ellen explained, with their own lived experience. We want to discuss the issues that children from minority ethnic group face. We want to share strategies that would help minimize those negative issues, and in some cases, where possible, eliminate them. And so we're going to be looking at what identity is to us as individuals, what it is to the children that's sitting in front of us, because that is really important, that you come from knowing who you are yourself, because you can only give from what you have. If you don't have the knowledge, it will be difficult to pass that on to a young person. And so when we're thinking about identity, it looks at the values we have, and that affects our choices. And sometimes Identity is not just one thing, it shows up in multiple roles. I'll be exploring that. I'll talk about racial identity, how people perceive you, how you perceive yourself. So I'll look at all of that in my bit of the workshop today. So to get us typing, so I'm not doing all the chatting, in your own words, how would you define identity? Okay, I want you to type that in the chat box. And if after writing your definition, I want you to think about the second statement. Identity for me is, what is identity for you? You know, so it's a broad statement, but I want to see what you come up with. And the third thing I'm going to look at is, how do you link identity to inclusion? How do you link identity, inclusion, and diversity? As I said earlier, diversity and inclusion is such a buzzword now. It's the biggest thing. We just had this explosive speech from our Home Secretary, and the country went crazy in the last few days because of what she said about multiculturalism. So it's quite we're quite on point in discussing it now. So when you hear these words, identity, inclusion, diversity, what do they even mean? How do we link them? So please put your comments in the chat, and I would love to see some of your ideas as we explore. So let me see what you have. Someone says identity is how you see yourself. Thank you very much. Any more? Please keep them coming. I would stop periodically to check what you've written. And someone else says identity equals personality, behavior, and presentation. That's really interesting. Another person says is your ability to identify the uniqueness of every individual. Very interesting. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please keep them coming. I'll read them out as we go on. So, why is this important for us to discuss? Why are we discussing it, identity? And I think it's important because of inclusion and diversity. It's important because it's about recognizing our rich human experiences. We are coming from somewhere, every person, every human being. Just like Ellen was saying earlier, my origin is not slavery. Before slavery, there were things that happened. And even after that, there were things that were going on. So it's important that we discuss this because we want to understand people's experiences. And in that way, ensure that everyone has the equal opportunity to thrive regardless of their background. And so in discussing the issues surrounding identity, it provides for us a pathway to build communities that are more equitable, that are more harmonious, and then it helps us to show empathy. So the first thing I am going to look at is racial identity, okay? So when I was preparing for this workshop, I remember going through the slides with my husband, and he was saying, are you sure you are very confident about what you're saying? I said, yeah, I am going to say it exactly as it is. When we talk about racial identity, we are looking at an individual's awareness and experience of being a member of a racial group. And this, when we talk about racial identity, it's not just one thing. It's not just, oh, I am Black and that's it. No, it's much more than that. Pick again from what, Navlin and Ellen were saying just now. So Navlin was talking about she going to, being brown, and then the hair, and being in a school that was a Christian school, but she's a Sikh herself. So it is not just the one thing, it's a mix of things. We heard what Ellen said. When she was in Devon, she was too Black. She moved to London, she was not Black enough. So Black, not Black enough, white, not white enough. So racial identity is a mix of many factors. There is individual factor, there's family factor, societal factor, and in a lot of cases, historical factors. So, but what we find is that racial identity significantly influences people's behavior, especially children. It influences their attitude and their beliefs. If as a teacher, you have a racial bias towards a certain group of people, and you find that child sitting in front of you, especially if a Black child sitting in front of you, and you already have a racial bias, it will be difficult to offer that child any opportunities. It will be difficult for you to help that child be the best that they can be. And so that's why knowing about racial identity is so important. So the key point I want to bring out there is that it influences behaviors, it influences attitude, and it influences beliefs. So think about it. What is your belief about a particular race? What is your attitude? about a particular race. How do you behave towards a particular race? It's really interesting. And then the next bit, which we would unpack as we go on, is about diversity. Now, when you think about diversity, think about it as a celebration of multiple identities. It's like a big, colorful mosaic, you know, so one of those Roman mosaic you'll see around. Now, each piece represents an individual identity. And so when we talk about celebrating identity, we're essentially saying that we are acknowledging everybody, we're appreciating the multiple of identities that can be presented in a group, in a community, or an organization. I sit in, you know, I talk about, you know, some schools where it is like the United Nations have gathered, because you see children from a wide variety of races, and that's what diversity is. And so when you think about diversity, it is that combination. It's where you have that representation, but then it needs to be celebrated. If it is not celebrated, then as we have seen, and history has shown us, including recent history, that diversity can be a problem in our communities. Now, what about inclusion? So if you think about what we've talked about, identity, what identity is that label, the story about ourselves, and all those is based on our experiences, our beliefs, our cultural background, our history. And then we think of diversity as a celebration of these multiple identities. What about inclusion then? So inclusion is not just, okay, yeah, I know that there are diverse identities. Well, okay, I know in my class there are 5 Black children and 10 Asian children. It is not just that. Now, it's ensuring that everyone, regardless of their identity, has equal opportunity for participation. It's the act of creating an environment where everyone feels welcomed, respected, supported, and they are valued. And I think that's really important, that they are valued, because if they are not valued, then that environment is not inclusive. Even, you know, and when we talk about strategies, you will see that there are lots of ways that you as a teacher can ensure that your classroom is inclusive. There are lots of ways that as a school leader, you can ensure that your school is inclusive. Something as simple as, what books do you have in your library? What visual representation do you have around your school? Those are little things that you can implement to ensure that your environment is inclusive. I'm going to stop for a bit and just see if there are any comments in the comment sections, because I'm just being a bit mindful of the fact that I don't go on and on. Okay, so what do we have here now? It says, identity is your ability to identify the uniqueness of every individual. Identity is about your personality. Identity is about who you are emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and physically. Thank you very, very much. So let's see who has been listening really well. So I'm going to give stars now. I want you to think about what I've said. I've talked about identity. I've talked about racial identity. I've talked about diversity, and I've talked about inclusion. Now, you tell me, which one of these 3 has stuck out to you already? So remember, your racial identity refers to the labels, the stories you tell yourself that's based on your experiences, your beliefs, and your cultural background. Diversity is a celebration of multiple identities. And then we then have inclusion, which is almost like the active participation of all identities, creating that environment where everyone can thrive. So you tell me in the chat, which one of these 3 really stands out for you as a teacher? Which one do you think, actually, this is something that as a school we need to work on? This is something that as an individual I need to work on and be more aware of? Please type that in the chat for me. All right, so the question says, I'll type it out and then you can answer if you want to, but we'll come back to it. It says, I'm trying to read that. How do we blend it all? Oh yeah. So the question is about all 3 that I've mentioned: racial identity, diversity, inclusion. The person is asking, how do we blend it all? Not to worry, as we go through, that will become even clearer, right? In terms of the chats, let me just pick out some of the chats that I can see from my screen. All 3. Somebody says the one that stands out the most is inclusion. Thank you very much for that. There's a really long comment here, which I will look through and then kind of summarize. So keep your chats coming, please, as we go on. Now, on to why is this important? Because now we'll look a little bit at legislation as well. Why is racial identity important in when a child is developing? So if you think about it, a child that has a healthy racial identity is most likely to have a really good self-esteem and a balanced view of the world. I think that's really important, because on the one hand, we can say, oh, well, you live in this country, or you live in so and so country, so you should behave like this, or you should behave like that. But really, what we are looking is for that healthy balance. If I'm teaching Black children, I want the Black children to know that, look, you're a Black child, you have a beautiful history, you have a beautiful personality, your race matters, your race is meaningful. The fact that you're a Black child doesn't mean I should see you as aggressive, or I should see you as a particular way. It's really important, because if you as the educator can take off that bias, and it helps the children to develop their self-esteem, to develop that balanced worldview, and it helps their overall development. And other aspect is that it provides a sense of belonging and security. You want a situation where the children in your class feel like, I'm welcomed here, I'm valued here, my ideas are important, what I have to say are important, my heritage is important, my culture is important in this place. I was sharing with my colleague yesterday as we're preparing for today. I said to her, because she was telling me, what are some of the things you do to ensure that there is that the children in your class develop a healthy racial identity? I said, it's really interesting that, for example, the register in the morning, so because my class is just mixed and really diverse, so I tell them, when I say good morning to you, I want you to tell me good morning in your language. And so I learn the language as they're saying it. So they tell me good morning in Spanish, good morning in Portuguese, and so on and so forth. And so it's really important that we are doing everything we can within our environment to help children to develop that healthy racial identity. When a child is well developed, when a child is well balanced, it will shape their attitude, it will shape their behavior, and it would develop their own understanding of other racial groups. So it's not just about, oh, me, myself, and I. It's about my ability to accept other people. Also, it influences their psychological well-being. It influences how they function socially. It helps them to form healthier relationships and even more positive connections with other people. So the piece of legislation which I talked about a few seconds ago is the Equality Act of 2010. It's a piece of legislation in the United Kingdom, and the idea of this legislation was to consolidate whatever was existing in terms of equity laws and put all of them together in the context of education. It has significant implications for us as teachers, because the idea of this act is to ensure that our institutions are inclusive, they're equitable, and most importantly, they are free from all discrimination. So some of the things you will find in the act, I'm not going to read all of it, it's several pages long, I can assure you. It gives what you call protected characteristics. In other words, these are, for example, female, male, and it goes on to several, groups and categories of identity. It talks about direct and indirect discrimination. I don't know if you heard the example that Navlin gave earlier about somebody tying her braids, and then Ellen was given the example of a teacher picking up her braid. Now that, my God, I cringed when they were talking. I thought, oh my God, that's just what you call direct. How more direct could you be? And so, but what this act does is to protect individuals, protect children within our institutions from that. Also, within that, there is a duty to make reasonable adjustments. In other words, what adjustments are you making? I'll give you a very simple adjustment, because sometimes when you talk about reasonable adjustment, they're thinking about toilets. It's not just toilet, it's even in the menu. It's in the menu, the food that the children eat. So it goes on to talk about public sector equality duty, and that's looking at the wider range as a teacher, what is your duty to make your environment inclusive. It talked about eliminating victimization and harassment. It also talks about excluding other people. It talks about how you ensure that everyone feels that they belong. So there are quite a lot of, interesting key provisions within the Act. And if you ever get the time, please read it because it is really important. Now, what are the implications for us in schools? Number one, policy. Check. So these are some of the things you can now start picking up from this workshop. What is my school's diversity and inclusion policy? What does it look like? Is there one? If there is none, you should have one. Okay. Number two, what does a curriculum look like? Is my curriculum inclusive? What festivals do we celebrate? What important days do we celebrate? Are we ensuring that we are being as inclusive as possible? Give a very simple example. The theme of Black History Month this year is I think something about sisters. I can't remember the exact words now, but it's about celebrating women who have made great strides within the Black community. And I think that's powerful because that's the first time I'm saying that is a very female-led theme. So think about your curriculum. How is it celebrating the racial identity and developing the racial identity of children? Next thing is an inclusive environment. Something really simple. Your visuals. The visuals, are they representative of the children in the school? Training and awareness, which is why we are doing this workshop. Training and awareness, being aware that, look, these exist. You don't just see the child and say, oh, I see you. No, you understand that, look, I'm sitting in front of a brown child is sitting in front of me. Where has this child come from? What is this child's backstory that I need to be aware of to help me develop this child? And of course, monitoring and enforcement. That's really important because whilst we're doing all these great things, whilst we're saying all these things, we still know that till now there are racial biases around us. There are racial incidents, and all of these need to be logged, all of this need to be monitored. And so there are lots of ideas that are within this act that will be useful in schools, but the overall idea is for every educational institution to know that you're responsible to provide an environment that's equal, it's inclusive, it is non-discriminatory for all students, regardless of their background or their characteristics. And then I think that's really important. And for us as teachers, what is our role? Number one, to remember, you are frontline. You are frontline staff. If you think of soldiers, you hear soldiers in the front line, that's who you are. You are frontline. So the first thing you want to do is the modeling of behavior, the language you use to address the children. What language do you use? Are you critical? Are you positive? And the next thing, being culturally sensitive and think about how to include. If a child says, you come on the Monday, how was your weekend? Well, I went to church on Sunday, and another child says, I went to the mosque. How inclusive are you in appreciating that these children have different lived experiences? And then the next thing about that is to challenge stereotypes. And until we start doing that, then racial discrimination will fester. And of course, supporting emotional development of children. Other aspects that you want to think about is how to promote critical thinking, fostering an environment of respect and empathy, ensuring that children feel respected within the environment that within the school environment. Nurture identity exploration. So a child who is unaware of maybe their background and things, what do you know about it? What can you find out about it? And then ultimately, which is our number one goal, our number one job as teachers, is to provide guidance. To provide guidance for these teachers. But remember, teachers, you cannot provide guidance unless you are aware yourself of your own racial identity and you're comfortable in your own skin. And that's me done. Thank you very, very much. Please pop your questions in the chat box for me, and I'll be delighted to answer them as we go on. So our next speaker today is the amazing Maliha. Maliha is on our team. She is a real trooper, very, very hardworking lady who's passionate about education and the development of young people. She's an education and curriculum specialist. Maliha, I'll stop talking now. The floor is over to you.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for the lovely introduction. So as Sophia just mentioned, I am Maliha Athar Rashid, and I am associated with education in different capacities and different levels. And my area of expertise has always been working with international students, be it at primary level, tertiary, or secondary. So it's been every day has been a learning experience. If I could just check that I'm sharing the right screen at the moment. So it's just me on the picture. Is that what
Yes.
you will see?
Yes, that's what
Lovely.
we can see.
All right.
Yes.
So my role in today's training would be to link identity, diversity, and inclusion with evidence from research and scholarship. We all want our practices to be supported by what has already been proven by research and scholarship. So I'd be sharing some research with you here to support why is it that we want you to include or to make your educational environment as inclusive as possible. Secondly, we would be working through various case studies to identify what would be the best strategies that would work for our educational environment. There is a possibility that one strategy may work for a certain situation, for a certain classroom environment. However, it may not fit in to another one. So we're not suggesting that one size will fit everyone. It's you would be the best judge at the end to pick and choose the ones that suit your environment. So let's start off with the research that I have. So we are trying to acknowledge and support that if identity is acknowledged, it can lead to integration, and if not, it can lead to fragmentations within a society. Now, the first research that I have here has significance of acknowledging multiple social identities and their impacts on individual experiences. Now, we don't have an age limit here, but what we are suggesting, this research is suggesting, is that acknowledging identity would definitely enhance individual experiences. It may be that it could be implemented at a certain age, but then the evidences may not be immediately available, but they may be witnessed at a later stage. But then again, if they're not addressed, they could have a negative impact on individual experiences. The second research that I have is acknowledging and incorporating students' cultural identities in education through a curriculum that reflects students' background leads to improve academic outcomes and engagement. I think this is all that we as educationists aim for, is enhancing learning outcomes and engagement in our students. So having said that, and finding a link between acknowledging identity and incorporating diversity is all that this research is suggesting. The next research that I have here is multiple intersecting identities can significantly impact on mental health of individuals. It is suggested to acknowledge intersectionality to better understand the unique experiences and challenges faced by individuals from marginalized group. So we may not realize that if we overlook identity, we don't acknowledge identity, we may be triggering mental health issues. So all these three researches are clearly highlighting the areas that we aim to improve on or enhance as educationists: learner experience, learning outcomes and engagement, and finally, someone who's mentally strong enough to face the challenges of their later lives. So that's what research has to say. Now, I have something for you to... This really nicely ties into what Sophia has discussed and what we would be discussing shortly. Now, having heard to what Sophia shared, I would like you to think about, if you were to develop a checklist of adaptive strategies that you would like to have in your educational setting, be it as an educationist or be it as a teacher, within your own capacity, what strategies would you take if you were to promote identity development? Now, for that, I have this QR code on your screen. If you could just scan that and start sharing your strategies. This is a Padlet, so I hope most of you have used it before, and anyone who's finding scanning a bit difficult, I can also share the link here in the chat box, so you can directly access the Padlet from here. So I will stop sharing this and take you to the Padlet. Oops, it's not letting me do that. Just give me a second. Yes. So here we are. So if you could just take a few minutes. And oops, can I just check, what am I sharing now? Am I sharing the Padlet?
Yes, we have the Padlet. I've just added something.
Lovely, thank you. So, I mean, technology is working fine for me then.
Yes.
Okay, so do the register in different languages of the children in your class. Excellent. So when you say registers, what would you change?
Was that for me to answer now?
Yeah, yes, yes. If you could just elaborate, because I was just thinking, how would that work?
It's really easy. So if you are privileged to work in a school where you have children that have come from different parts of the world, so you could say good morning and they respond to you in, in Arabic, they respond to you in Spanish, they respond to you in French, some respond in English, in Gaelic, and so on and so forth. So that way is just essentially welcoming them first thing in the morning in their own language. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Anyone else who would like to add something to the Padlet, or you're taking time to think? That's all right. Okay, we have one more thing added there. It says, ask the children about their festivals and what the significance is. I think that's a very nice thing. And this would definitely include to the knowledge of the teacher as well. And please feel free to endorse someone else's idea if you agree with it by clicking onto the rate button and giving it a star. I can see someone is writing. Oh, 4 stars. No, 5 in fact. Lovely. All right, do show and tell activities that encourage the children to share their life experiences. Yes, yes, it's really nice bringing something from that they can associate to the culture, the practices, the home values. Yep, that's a good one. And I don't think it needs a lot of preparation or organization. It's just some little bit of encouragement. Celebrate, incorporate world cultural events as part of your curriculum. Yeah, that's a very good one. As a school, have International Day celebrations. Okay. We'll talk about the practicality and the limitations of it shortly. So we'll just give another minute, and then possibly I'll start sharing what strategies we would like you or what we would suggest to try out in your learning environment. I'll just take one last person who's writing at the moment. Yes. Oh, there are quite a lot that have been added. So it says, during RE lesson, we learn about many religious festivals during the time they happen. children then can share how they celebrate these festivals in their own families and communities. Lovely. I like that. I like that. This is really good. Have visuals around the school that celebrate different races. I think that's a very good one. We do have notice boards in every school, so it's just putting a little bit of effort to acknowledge the culture, the people, the languages that are already there. This reminds me, once I went to one of my child's primary school, and the head teacher very proudly said, "Oh, come on, oh, you would be surprised to know that we've got 80 languages in our school." And I said, wow, where is the acknowledgement? I think it's something really nice that you should be putting somewhere right at the entrance of your school, at the reception, acknowledging that you've got these languages or the speaker of these languages in your school. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all your views here. Now, very quickly, if we go back to the strategies that we would like you to try. So if I share this as a whole screen, no, that's not what I want. Yeah, perfect. So we have a checklist of strategies that we would like to share. Most of it has already been shared by you, so you've made my job a little easier. So cultivate cultural awareness, have all these kind of events that you would acknowledge the various cultural backgrounds that you have in your school. It doesn't take a lot of energy, a lot of resources. It's just acknowledging and bringing in things, some of which was shared on the Padlet, bring in show and tell. So it's just a matter of bringing in something which has got sentimental value, which has got a cultural value to your students. Reflect your own biases. Now, this is really important for us as educators. We always have preconceived notions related to a culture, an origin. So, for instance, my preconceived notion regarding Africans having been brought up in Nigeria, I always felt that Africans would always be good in sports. So that's the positive side of it. But then when I became an educationist, I also felt that there was a downside to it. Can't Africans be good politicians? Can't Africans be scientists? Why am I just labeling them as athletes? So having said that, those were my biases that I held against a specific racial community. But I've addressed those, I can assure you that. So similarly, we need, as educators, we need to keep those biases aside and address our students as individuals, and then bring in the identities that they have. The next thing that I have is incorporate diverse curriculum. Now, this is very much related to what our keynote speakers highlighted, was that in our curriculum, we always have a specific race, a specific stereotypical character that would be labeled as a prince or princess. So we need to address those, having a diverse curriculum where we could incorporate stories that are associated and celebrated for different cultural practices would be something that we are recommending here. The next thing that I have here is use inclusive language. Now, this is not related to diversity, but definitely in terms of identity, where we have students who may want to be gender fluid, who would want to be not to be labeled as a male or a female. So we may want to use language which is gender neutral. So I myself, I'm getting myself used to of using gender neutral language, like instead of always addressing as a he or a she, why don't you have a plural like learners, students, things like that. And then again, you could always have things, if they have a preferred pronoun, you can always do that. At the moment, I'm working with adults, so it's quite easy for them to stand up and share their preferred pronoun. But at a lower level, it might be a bit tricky, but you can always open doors for this provision for the students to come in and share that with you if they're not really confident enough to do it in the classroom. But if there is a norm for, let's say at the beginning of the term, you put out a question that, is there a preferred pronoun that you would like yourself to be referred to? Would you like to share it in class? If not, come to me and tell me separately, and then you can speak on their behalf to promote that. Celebrate cultural heritage. Sophia has already elaborated on that. So if there is something that can be associated to a specific culture and you have a student representative of that, bring them forward, bring them forward. Forward a safe space. So there are times that we try as students to bring in their own cultural artifacts, as you may call, but then they are a bit withdrawn because they feel that they might be teased, they might be bullied. So setting up the right norm would be what we are suggesting here. So if right at the beginning, and if right at the primary level, or even at the nursery, if this this norm is set, then things would be much more easier to take up from. The next thing that I have is what I've just already repeated. It's just what I've shared. Build inclusive classroom norms. So setting up rules, practicing things that are not offensive. We are also saying that we acknowledge identities, but that again, we are not saying that everything should be accepted. It's absolutely fine to have to disagree with someone, but then again, if you have a differing opinion, it should be conveyed in a polite manner. So setting up a classroom environment that is conducive to all that is what we are recommending. Accommodating learning style, it's a whole area that needs to be explored on an individual basis. So in terms of identity, if there is a specific learning style that a student is used to in his or her culture, then you may have to acknowledge that. I'll just share my experience here. So I was working with refugees, those were adults, and I tried doing a reading comprehension since my area is second language acquisition. So their understanding of reading comprehension was very different from what we have here. So they were always thought about that whatever the words are there, the keywords, you identify the keywords in the question, and wherever you find those in your text, quote that specific sentence with one above it and one below it. So that's what they felt was reading comprehension. And it took me a while to identify that. And then I had to explain it to them. And so I may have simply been assuming that that's lack of understanding or incompetence. So I could have labeled them as incompetent. But then again, I was lucky that one of the students was bold enough to come and share that with me. So every day, as I said, is a learning experience. You just have to keep your eyes and your ears open. Providing representation. So if you have a diverse classroom, give them opportunities to represent their culture, create special days, special weeks, and those are all that we are suggesting here. Collaborate with families. I've always find parents are quite eager when they get to know that they have a chance to promote their own culture. So it may not be that you would be the leading person. You can always nominate a parent, and they have the right contacts, the right resources to promote their own culture, because that's the opportunity for them to come out and shine. The other thing is, I think Sophia mentioned this also, that celebrate current events. So if there is something that you notice or you're aware of, acknowledge that. Considering that we have this Black History Month being celebrated in the UK, so acknowledge that. And now I would refer back to the resources that our lovely educational team has developed. It's rich with material that you could just pick and choose and take to your classroom. So now, enough of speaking from my side. I have these two case studies for you. So if I read the first one, Sarah is a teenager from a multicultural background. Her mother is Indian and her father is British. Growing up, Sarah often felt torn between her Indian heritage and her British upbringing. She is also from a low-income neighborhood and faces negative stereotypes about her community and often feels underestimated by others. Now, this others could be school, could be her social circle, could be her friends. So we are thinking on those lines. The second one that I have is Mia is a grade 6 student who has recently moved to the UK. She comes from a multiracial background. Her mother is African, of an African descent, and her father is of Asian descent. She sometimes feels pressured to fit into one specific racial category and her new environment. Now, with reference to these two, I'm happy for you to take a picture of this if you just want to keep the details with you. The task will follow. So if you are ready, I'll just give you a few seconds. Okay, so the task is, so with reference to the above case studies, what steps would you suggest for your institution, be it as possibly a head, a deputy head, a lead teacher, or a teacher yourselves? What steps would you take or recommend your institution to take to promote identity inclusion? For this, we would encourage you to put the responses in the chat box. So if you could take a minute, and what would be ideal is that if you just wrote one and then gave your suggestion, so we could easily relate it to the first case study. If you're talking about case study 2, put a 2 and then put your response. That would be lovely. I would be happy for any of the panelists to suggest steps that they would recommend. Incorporate cultural diversity in the curriculum and celebrate it. Okay. Acknowledge that the feeling of being torn between 2 or 3 identities is part of students' identity. Okay. Or possibly bringing the brighter side of both the cultures or races would be good. So we'll just wait for one more response. Okay, someone has given us a detailed one. Provide a safe space to chat. Okay, oops, I've gone. That has disappeared. Let me just go up. Okay, provide a safe space to chat with the learner, unbiased. Ask if she has anything in mind to support. Also encourage Sarah, is it okay to draw from both aspects and develop a confident and confident her own identity, and that's okay. Okay, so basically giving a chance to voice your own concerns and possibly suggesting, and to be very honest, I've always found that you may be working around to find a solution, but the best solution comes from the student or the child themselves. We need to encourage their languages, and we'll make use of music to encourage this. Also during cultural days, the pupils should be encouraged to showcase their culture. That's good. We have one more. Confidence. Okay. All right. Yeah, I felt that that was the word that you were looking for. Anyhow, thank you so much for your responses. It is definitely enlightening. Now, my next question would be, what challenges you may have in doing this? So, speaking to the student to express their own needs, to all these suggestions that you've given, what might be the challenges that you could face? Lack of cooperation from the family. Perfect. I would agree. At times I've found that the family isn't willing to acknowledge that there's something missing. The child may not be willing to engage, yes, for any reason, feeling guilty towards their heritage and own needs, letting their parents down, perfect. Societal disapproval, yeah, I think you've got all the nice ones here. All right, so we'll come down to what we suggest or we feel might be the challenges, and then we'll quickly look at what might be the steps that could be taken in order to minimize those challenges. So if I went to my screen and I shared that. So unfamiliarity with diverse cultures. Now we are educators, but we are not magicians. We don't have a magic wand to explore every culture. Even if we explore a culture, there is no guarantee that we are moving in the right direction. The resources might be faulty, all that. So one of the challenges could be that you have very little knowledge of the culture that you have in your classroom. The next thing that we think would be a challenge is lack of inclusive curriculum and resource limitations. Now, having said that, I would refer back to what the keynote speakers highlighted, that there weren't enough resources to promote the varied cultures that were there in their times. But I think we are in a lucky period where we are acknowledging the fact that we have a multicultural environment, and it's absolutely fine to bring in resources from other cultures. But then again, the challenge might be whether we are choosing the right one or not. The other challenge that we could have is time constraint. We as educators have a suggested curriculum to complete, but then we are being told that we need to incorporate the diverse cultures that are there in our classrooms. So that might be something that teachers or educators may find difficult. Then we have another challenge, which is sensitive topic, which I would refer to one of the suggestions: speak to a child with in confidence, and in possibly it might come up, the talk might end up with something really sensitive, and you as an educator might not be in a position to handle that. So those are the fears that we have had teachers highlighting when we discussed around why not addressing identity in a positive manner. The next list that I have, student resistance. So if the student feels for any reason is not wanting to share their concern or reason for being isolated. And then we could have resistance from their peers. So when we try and incorporate their needs or their culture, we have this group of students who are least interested. So that might bring in, that might backfire for towards the efforts that we are trying to put in. Then we may have resistance from our colleagues as well, where we addressing a specific, trying to promote a specific culture. How is that evaluated by our colleagues? Could be a challenge in certain situations. Lack of training. If you don't know how to handle a situation, then it might be tricky for us as educators. Evaluating and accountability, and then how much of effort we put in to acknowledge a culture. How is that evaluated and seen by our peers, our bosses, to be more precise? If that is not appreciated in a positive way, that appears to be not a pleasant experience. Parental concerns. So you may be wanting to promote a specific culture, but there are parents of other students who might feel that what you're promoting are against their family practices or beliefs. So that could be another challenge. Now, having said that, we still have strategies in place to minimize those. So I'll very quickly talk about continuous education and training for teachers. So this could include talking about the policy. You will have a charter or possibly a document that talks about how to make your educational environment inclusive. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I would recommend that educationists try and provide opportunities for that. Curriculum adaptation, set clear objectives is another thing. Build a supportive community. This community could be based on parents, teachers, and students themselves. Incorporating multidisciplinary approach. So if you're using, let's say, a text from history that could be taken into an English classroom, then you could have, let's say, if you have a currency of a country that can be taken into a classroom for numeracy. So those are the kind of suggestions that we are saying. But then again, we are also promoting diversity. So collaborate with parents, caregivers. We've already covered. Foster empathy, so making others feel how other cultures are. So actually giving them the experience of someone else's shoes is not what we are targeting. Model inclusive behavior. If we ourselves are inclusive and we model that behavior in our classroom or in our school environment, that's what we are suggesting here. Collaborating with colleagues. Now, this doesn't mean that collaboration is suggested just within the school environment. It could be within the network, within the area. Provide additional resources. Now, you may have people who come from that specific cultural environment that you're trying to promote, so have their input on it. Regular self-reflection. I can't stress enough on this. If you've tried out something, please reflect. To what extent has it worked? If it hasn't, why not? How is it that you would alter it? And how is it that you would be taking it forward? So that's me done. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Now I would like to hand over to my colleague, Alice, who would share some hands-on activities for you. Before I finish off, can I just remind you that we have our lovely education team has put in so much of effort to create these educational packs that are there on the African Awareness Week. Please go. Most of the challenges would be overcome once you visit that website. Thank you.
Hi, I'm hoping the slides are going to change.
I'll just stop sharing, Alice, and then you can take over.
Thank you. I think Sophie is taking over for the slide.
Thank you, Maliha. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lovely. So I'm going to be looking at some practical things that can be done in the classroom and or in the school to look at identity. And one of the first things we're going to look at is the identity iceberg. Now you can get some more ideas from respectme.org, but the purpose of this is to explore identity and experience, the factors which influence how and why we behave as we do, and how people's behavior might impact on others, as was mentioned at the beginning about how other people's behaviors can have such an impact on you. So the first one, if we can go to the next slide, Sophia, because I'm not sure. So the first one is it's a kind of 30-minute activity. You might want to draw an iceberg and emphasize what's hidden from view, saying people are very similar to icebergs. Some things are on the surface, such as your physical characteristics, accent, dress, but there are other aspects which are quite hidden and not immediately obvious. So that might be things like past experiences, where we grew up, our values, our beliefs, our likes and dislikes. And we could discuss things like risk of making assumptions with, we could discuss prejudice, we could discuss intolerance, depending on the age of your, of your class. And maybe then at the end, look at what we have in common, what we have that are unique. So children could do their own one, or you could do a class one. And you could leave it at that. You could, if you want to do a kind of second part, which would probably be more like a kind of 20-minute activity, where you'd be looking more at examples of kind of respectful behavior about that, and what's driven, what it is in the unseen behaviors that might have driven some kind of positive, respectful behavior. And perhaps has there been anything that people have done that might have been disrespectful, and what might have driven that as well. And then kind of looking at how behavior can influence and impact on others. Next slide, please. I feel like Dr. Whitty. Right, so for those, this is looking at identity. Some people can think, you know, in terms of Britain, oh, you know, there's some very British things. And this is about kind of loosening up those ideas that in terms of British identity, things that are considered as very British aren't. So for the example of a cup of tea, you know, can you get more British than having a cup of tea? But actually asking children maybe to have a look at where these things come from. So tea, for example, native to East Asia, comes more from China, you know, Indochina, Assam. Cups and porcelain, earliest cups from China, 10 BC. There's also examples of wooden quaighs from Scotland. Sugar, first found in India in the 1st century AD, and the word sugar comes from the Sanskrit word grit or gravel. So nothing there is British. A pint, people might think, oh, that's very, very British, but that also comes from the Middle East or Asia. And again, you know, the first evidence is from a tablet 6,000 years ago. And it's spread with the Romans, and even the word beer comes from bibere, from Latin to drink, and then the Roman monks started to do it. We weren't a seafaring nation, so potatoes came from Latin America. So all sorts of things. So really having a look that actually our identity may not be quite what we think it is, that actually we're so, it's been so spread and so influenced by other cultures. So perhaps if you're finding that there's certain cultures that are very strong in one school, maybe loosening that up a little bit and showing how much more influence there are from other cultures. Okay, so they could have a bit of a workout of things that they think are very strongly from their culture and they're part of their identity. Next slide, please. Okay, some games here that could be done. So just by looking at me. So this might be asking some people to reveal some things. So a bit like musical statues, have some music on, and then when the music stops, saying they find a partner to face, my name is, and one thing you might not know about me, or something you cannot tell just by looking at me is, and then ask them to reveal something that they may not have shared yet, or something interesting. And then a bit more music, and then they move on and share something else. You could differentiate that by giving some prompts to people who might find that quite hard to do or might feel a bit shy. Or you might say to some people, you need to make sure it's something different each time, or you need to really make sure it's something related to your culture, or something, you differentiate it in the way that you might think. What's in a name, so that you could make this into a bit of a display, but having either children could find out what then, where their name comes from, what does it mean, and that's very Googleable. For example, Alice means noble, apparently, but even better, they could find out what their name means, and then you could put it in a box and pull it out and work out, we've got a meaning here, who do we think it is? And because all the names, meanings of names are pretty positive, it's quite nice for people to think, oh, they think that relates to me, and they think that relates to me. So it's a very kind of positive way to find out what's behind people's names. You could always make it into a display and put it up on the board, and then finding out, well, why did you match that meaning to that person as well? Step into the circle is a bit more about encouraging some of that kind of deeper identities, and you'll find in 10 minutes you might find things out about your class that you didn't know. So getting people to go into a big circle and then read some statements that you've prepared, and they could be from the light-hearted to things that are a bit deeper. Start with the light. And then anybody who answers yes, so kind of yes or no answers, then steps into the circle. And then we can, have a look at, what do we know? What did we find out about people? What did we find out about people's identity we didn't know? Who do we share that with? Where are the surprises? What, have the reflection afterwards. What was interesting? And what does that now tell us about something that we're glad we know about? What did we learn? Next slide, please, Sophia. Okay, so what's in a name? I think I've just done that one, and matching the name. So yes, I've just did that one, and the step into circle I've done. Sorry, I've done that one. My slides are in a slightly different order. So there we go. That was just when I was finding out about what Sophia meant. So I could have said whose name meant wisdom, whose name meant noble, whose name meant beautiful woman, and you could have worked it out. But anyway, we will move on because I have explained that one. The slides I have are in a slightly different order. Lovely. Thank you, Sophia. If we can have the next one. So this one, affirmation identities. So we can do this in lots of different ways. One way you might want to do is kind of fan mail. So have each child's name at the top of the piece of paper, and then each person is to write a positive comment about them. Fold it on, pass it on. Needs to be positive, and you have to kind of set the rules there. You could do it as a little kind of concertina person. You've seen there, they could draw their face, or just have their name. Particularly kind of with the younger children, they might quite like that, or just put a statement, something that's nice. And again, just trying to kind of go beyond the obvious, going the kind of deeper things about their identity that they might like about them, or sharing something that they like by writing a word, sticking it on a post-it. Post-its don't stick on clothes very well, but you could potentially stick it on, where they're working, or stick it on their back. Something like that. And then you can go around and read about what people have said about each other. And then afterwards, what is it that I've learned about myself in terms of how people might kind of see me, and what's consistent about what I know about myself? What did I learn about others? And then you might want to make that into a word cloud. And there are all sorts of word cloud software out there. It's very quick and easy to do. Again, makes quite a nice display. He was obviously talking about why are we not putting more languages up there. And again, very easy to do with things like wordcloud.com and Monkeylearn. Very, very easy. But if you're using kind of one word or a few words, again, it's such a quick, easy display to do. Okay, next slide, please. So guess who? Another one. So potentially what you could do is each person could draw a little picture of themselves, and they could kind of guess who it is. But instead of it being just the obvious characteristics, you could be sharing kind of things about identity. They're a little bit deeper. And doing it as a game that way. Or you might want to do it with famous people, but perhaps they've studied in Black History Month, for example. Again, a little bit resource heavy on that one, but you could potentially do that if there's a lot of inspirational people that they have been studying. Assuming that there aren't the number of people in a kind of typical Guess Who game that you've been studying Black History Month, what you could do instead is have the game where they need to have 3 rounds where they describe the act, and then it's one word. So what you have there are your inspirational people. And it may be that they've studied them, it may be that they've that people have gone away and said, well, actually in my culture this person is very meaningful, or even this is an author I like, or a character I've liked in a book, and then they put the names into a bowl or into a box or whatever, get into 2 teams, and then team 1 then have to describe to the person they're not allowed to say who it is. Round one, and then the other team do that too. You get a kind of minute each, see how many you get. Next time round, you're only allowed to act it, no words, see how many each team get. Third time round, you only get one word to describe it. So they do become quite familiar with these inspirational people. And like was said at the beginning, you know, it's not all slavery. It's about these inspirational people and what have they done. Next slide, please. Sophia did a great job. Another one here. So speed dating. So again, two big circles, inner circle, outer circle, facing each other, and then they'll have 1 minute to, so kind of 30 seconds each, to maybe find out some things about each other. They might need some help with some questions. You might need to give them some prompt ideas about how you can find out about someone's identity, or you know, thinking about what are you willing to share, what would you like people to know. And then maybe at the end of the minute, what's something you have in common, something that's unique, and then move around again. And you know, so you might get a good 15 people there. That could take a little while there. And then kind of looking at just being aware that although our identities are different, there will always be something in common and something that makes us an individual. One of the things, I was talking to a group of children about identity and how they perceived it, and the first thing they were saying was, oh, it's online identity, and it's to do with or identity cards. And for me, it was interesting that identity, the first thing was about the kind of it all being online, and I hadn't kind of thought about, for young people, it being their first port of call, with the idea about identity being on, you know, an online thing, because they get so much e-safety. So I think, you know, really having a little think and using the resources, as Maliha was saying, from the Afrikindness website, about what identity means, and you know, what that looks like, what does it mean to each person, and about what makes us individual, what makes us unique, what do we have in common, is a really kind of useful way to gauge where they're at with the terminology of identity. I think we're on to the next slide, please. So guess my identity, again, so you might want to choose some people who are pretty confident with their identity, but are willing to share things, maybe to write 10 statements, maybe everyone could write 10 statements about themselves there, and then label them from the kind of the most obscure, the hardest to work out, being 10 down to the most obvious. And then you can play Guess My Identity. And so you read out number 10, the hardest one. And if they work out who it is, they get 10 points. If not, go to 9. If they work out who it is, they get 9 points. Read out the next level and see if they can work out the identity of either the person in the class or the famous person they've been studying potentially. So that is that one. Next slide, please. I really do feel like Chris Whitty. So this is reverse charades. Obviously you could play charades, but this is reverse charades, where this again might be to do with who you've been studying, again some inspirational people. And so here you'd have two groups, so you're learning about people might share their cultural identity or inspiring from different cultures or part of Black History Month. Get into 2 or more groups, and again you've got one guesser and the rest are acting. And so as a teacher, you'd show the name or even a picture of the person, and then he needs to act it out to the group, and if they can guess who it is, then they get the point, and maybe have a minute or so to do that before it swaps. So yeah, getting a good idea there of the people that we want to talk about, as was mentioned at the beginning. Next slide, please. aware of time. So you'll have ideas about lots of kind of creative ideas here, but maybe thinking about some Adinkra symbols from Ghana and the Côte d'Ivoire, about the symbols and meanings and the philosophical significance there. They could design their own cloth. Obviously, these symbols are found in logos and clothes and furniture and sculpture and earthenware pots and many others. So they could make their own logo with their name, or they could make their own cloth, or whatever it is that. But they could make a little thing using these symbols. And if you go on to www.adinkrasymbols.com, they're all on there. You've got loads with what their meaning is, and they can choose, that really fits with my identity. So some nice creative ideas, I think, from there. Looking at the kente colors and the cloth as well, also that might help them to think, oh, I could design something there that would really fit with my identity there. Next slide, please. Here, this is similar to the web of inclusion, where you have some string and you kind of throw the string across to somebody who has a similar thing to you, but again doing it this time with different colors. So where you might share some kind of aspect of your identity, maybe you speak the same language, so you're connected with a web, and you're getting the blue string. You might share similar values, and maybe that's all the kind of yellow string, and they absolutely love getting all connected and wound up together. So you can see here they've written down what it's hard to see it on the screen, but they've written down some things that they thought were very key about their identity that they wanted to share, and became all kind of very entangled in their identity together, all different but very connected. Next slide again, please. And lots of art activities. So if for people who are not so confident but like writing, they could talk about why they're unique and what makes their identity, what makes them with their identity. So it could be done like fingerprint. It could be done with pictures that they can cut out or find from the internet. It could be done with words, like with the I am bit. It could be done with the outline of their face, and again it could be words, it could be pictures, however they want. There are some nice examples of half a face, and then what makes my identity, either drawn or kind of collage or pictures. So this is what's underneath, this is what you see, and then this is what's underneath on the other side. So art is a great way to really be able to explore identity and really kind of get underneath how people see their identity and how they can express it. So I think, and it's also very, it's popular and easy to do depending on the age and depending on the resources and the, how skilled some of them feel. You don't need to be very skillful to be able to cut some things out or write some words and pyow them, not that that's a word, from the beginning. Okay, and next slide, please. So just going back to the Afrikindness website, lots of books to read which are about identity. We've got some ones here that are a great idea, different ages there. What I won't do, because we are getting short of time, we said we'd be about 1:45, but is tell you all about them. But what you can do is find out about these, and there's lots and lots of other books as well. So reading, we know how much kids love being read to, and for them finding books to do with their identity is great. So have a look on the Afrikindness website, and share, if you'd like to share some of the books that you think are really good, that'd be lovely to hear right now. That would be super. So please put those on. And then I think we're going to go on to questions. So next slide, I think, is Q&A, I believe. And I'm going to hand back to Sophia, who might like to field the question.
Thank you so much, Alice. Thank you. That was really practical. Lots of useful ideas for us to explore. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm just going to look in the chat to see if we have any questions or comments. Lots of positive comments. Thank you very much. Things like, what does it say? Fantastic idea. This is awesome. Really brilliant. Wonderful activities. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Great ideas. Thanks, Alison. I'll keep an eye out for any questions as I just kind of start rounding this up for us. Let's make sure I'm still sharing my screen. It just feels like my screen has still been shared. Okay, so I think at this point I just want to kind of draw our attention to Africa Awareness Week, which is from the 9th to the 15th of October. And we have an amazing website. Please, please, please go onto our website. There are lesson plans, activities for children, ideas for parents. Alice has mentioned some of the ideas for books. Please go on there. There is a lot for you to explore, a lot for you to use in your class, especially in this month of October. So do take advantage of the resources that have been created, especially for you. It would make us extremely happy for you to use this in your classroom, that we can get feedback from you. And the website's address is africaAwarenessWeek.co.uk. If you type that into Google, is the first result right at the top, and it'll come straight up. Thank you so much. I can't see questions, just lots of thank you. Lots of thank yous and lots of amazing and grateful hearts. And that's a snapshot of the website. We please follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, TikTok. We're there. Africaness. Just do a little Google search and you find us on any platform that is your favorite. We do want you to be in touch with us because we've got loads of stuff coming out that we think will benefit a lot of us as educators. So we'll be delighted if you can follow us on all platforms, please. So, there's some more books in the comment section. I just want thank you so much, Ann Palmer, for that. Diversity and inclusion, 90 children's books that celebrate difference. Wow, I'm gonna look at that definitely, straight up. That is lovely. Okay, and I think that brings us to a close. Huge thanks to everyone who was able to attend. As I said, this has been recorded. And so if you like a recording, you can send us an email, info@africankindness.com, and we will be able to forward that to you. It's worth sharing with your staff, it's worth sharing with colleagues, because there is so much that we can do to help develop our children's sense of identity and awareness of who they are. And I think that is it from all of us. Thank you so much. God bless you. Have a wonderful time. South Africa, Canada, Nigeria, UK, Scotland, wherever you joined us from today, have a really good day and enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully we can be in touch again and to share more ideas. Good night.